Okay, welcome to Leaders in Conversation. This is our Series 1 wrap-up, our all-star show. Leaders in Conversation is where we explore humanness at work with big-hearted leaders in conversations that build clarity to solve today's business challenges. And so we're going to pull all of our guests back in from Series 1. Welcome. I am your co-host, Ken Blackwell.
Oh, and I'm Amanda Cookson. Good.
Here we are.
Good start. I was thinking, who am I? What's going on? I'm me. Great. So welcome to everybody who's here on Zoom, and also to the people in the Leaders in Conversation Facebook group. I've been going through, and so far we've had over 400 people who have joined us during the series. So thank you for your support. And I know some of you have been to every single episode, which is awesome. So today we thought it would be really exciting to bring all of those speakers back and to have a shared collective conversation around how you create more humanness at work and make that ideal workplace for the 21st century. So what I'd like you to do, so that we can sort of say hi and find out who you are, is if you can use chat and put into chat where you're from, and also what a human workplace means to you.
Awesome. So let's introduce our guests. So we've invited back all our guests. We have many of them here with us today. So from episode 1, we have Anne Archer, who's a mental health advocate focusing on well-being at work, and AmandaMichelle, who goes by the name of Mish Echevarría, who's an executive coach currently working with first responders in Buenos Aires.
Oh, and then from episode 2, we're so slick, Ken. You'd think that this was, we've never done this before. Right, so from episode 2, big-hearted leadership, we've got Bella Abrams, who is Director of IT Services at the University of Sheffield.
Awesome. And from episode 3, Finding Your Voice, Owning Your Space, we have Penny Lee, who is the Brand Directress who works with kick-ass women in business.
From episode 4, we have, which was about the human workplace, we've got Simone Fenton-Jarvis, who is the Workplace Consultancy Director at RICO.
And from episode 5, Inclusive Cultures in Online Spaces, we have Vimla Apadu, who is a design thinker and advocate for changing the way businesses think.
And then we have apologies from Jules Roberts, who was our episode 6 guest, who talks about the power of listening. Unfortunately, she's not well enough to be with us today, but she sends her love to all of us, which is great.
And also apologies from Evan Roth and Wendy Swire, who were our other 2 guests there in episode 1.
Great. So I want to ask the first question, but I think, Ken, that, are you still screen sharing? Oh, there's everybody. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so
we are slick.
Yeah, do you know, why not make the end of season party just as crazy as possible? Why not do that? So I would like to start by defining what humanness at work means. And I think this would be a great question to go to Bella and then to Simone.
So, I think being human is being me, not least because I am human. And I think that there is, or there has been, an idea that when you are at work and possibly in a senior position, you have to present a front, and that front is a corporate front, and it's not necessarily bringing your whole self to leadership. And I prefer not to do that. I think you can be authentic. I think you can have integrity, honesty, and frankness. And all of those things are about who I am and why I'm good at what I do. And I think if I didn't bring all of those things with me, it would be, people would sense and smell the lack of integrity, and I don't think I'd be being my whole self, and people wouldn't trust me. So that's what I think being human at work is all about.
What she said. Yeah, I think, you know, it's, for me, it's that kind of bringing the humanness is the connection that happens within teams. Love does belong in the workplace with colleagues. It's a different type of love than the one that you're all probably thinking about. And it's got to be that connection, that belonging. We've got a purpose, and being in that situation where we're human because we're not perfect, things will go wrong, and where it's how we how we use our network around us to react to them kind of failures to then kind of push forward and improve. So yeah, welcome failure and be brave enough to own it and move past it.
I think for me, humanness at work is the ability to just be completely yourself, and it's okay for everyone else to be completely yourself. So Ken and I have been awesomely slick so far, and that's okay because it doesn't matter. It's not important. It's about the quality of the conversation we're going to have together, and that for me is about humanness. Does anyone else want to chip in?
I was actually going to say as well, I think it's not just about being able to be yourself, it's about having the choice to be yourself. So I think it's really important that we empower people to decide who they want to be and which parts they might not want to bring into the workplace and which parts they do, but not assuming that there is that stopgap. There's that kind of, this is who you are and this out of work and this is who you are in work. This is a space for you to be whoever you need to be at that time, and there's no kind of constraints around that either.
Yeah, and that feels like that's about feeling safe, actually, about how you express yourself and what you express.
Yeah,
I think that's when people do their best work as well.
Yeah.
When they feel safe.
Yeah, when they feel safe, when they can be you. I'm just looking in the chat. So there's some really interesting comments that people have shared about being human at work is about being able to bring your emotion. It's about bringing your authentic self. So emotion was from B. Brooke, I can't see the dots, and I think it's Julia Fell who says, bringing your authentic self at work with all the imperfections and messiness that entails, and knowing you won't be marked down for not always getting it right first time and for not knowing everything, which is just gorgeous.
And maybe have Anne just jump in. You know, we were talking about safety, and I think this touches on some of your work. What are some of the things we need to do to be able to be safe, right? If we're going to be human, what is it that we might need to actually be safe?
Did you say Anne, Ken?
Yes.
Perfect. I thought you did. I didn't want to just butt in.
I meant you. Yes.
You know what? I think something that Vim said is really important. Is about choice, and psychological safety needs to be. You need to be able to feel that it's okay not to speak up. It's okay when you do speak up. And I think one of the core qualities for me, and it's something Jules was talking about, is for leaders particularly to be able to listen really well, but listen to the whole person and hear if there's something going on in the background that you're not picking up, so that you can allow space for that to be named and heard and talked through. And I think sometimes it's as much about being able to listen really well and react and respond to that that helps to create safety. It's when we don't share and we don't express that we can get ourselves into all sorts of challenges.
So maybe, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add in just some of the comments that have come in from the chat as well. So Barry from Feast and Fables has said a human workplace is one where everyone's voice is heard and valued. And I think that kind of echoes what we've been talking about here. Jonathan has said that he says a human workplace, or being human at work, also acknowledges the part robot nature of one's condition, being on the planet, interfacing with systems and technology. Because I guess you're right that part of that being human at work is how we respond to all of the tech around us. It's like at the moment we're being humans together through technology, and it does change the dynamic, and we do have to work slightly differently to make it work and to have successful conversations rather than it be quite so clunky. It's effort, isn't it, and thinking that's needed sometimes to connect.
Well, and, you know, even for this conversation itself, right? As we've been talking, you know, kind of in the green room beforehand about, you know, what it is we have to do to adapt ourselves to, you know, this particular platform, right? And the nature of this virtual work, and not being able to have all of the clues that we might have face to face. although that's maybe, I don't know, there maybe needs to be a different term for that, because I think we are face to face. Like I can see everybody's face. In person maybe has got to be the term, like, or physically present. There needs to be.
I think that's a great question, Ken. I'd love to hear what the panelists think it's
yes.
called.
What is the?
Because we are all here, aren't we? We are all present.
Yes.
I think,
how do we distinguish this?
Yeah, I was speaking to a therapist friend a few weeks ago about this, and she's now saying that when things go back to normal, they've got an option to continue the therapy online. But ultimately, if they want to do that, then the British kind of Association for Counselling, or whatever it is, has basically said that they must have online training about how to read people over a camera. And I had a really interesting conversation with her and said, that's maybe we all need that training. And said, you know, it's that kind of the cues, the kind of, said the things in therapy where somebody's fidgeting, you can't see that. If I was fidgeting, you can't see what I'm doing. So you can't see if I'm uncomfortable, if I can hide it in my face. And yeah, we went through, it was a really interesting conversation. And I think there's going to be an element that there's certain, you know, there's been a lot of conversations around how do we onboard people in the remote world and build trust? How do we get that relationship? And I think, you know, there's a lot to be said to being present with someone physically to build that relationship. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the coming months and years, I guess, around all of that.
Can I just say something there? Because Mish and Amanda and Ken and Wendy and Evan and I, we've never actually met. We've only like in person collectively, and I'd say some of the conversations we've had have probably been amongst the deepest I've ever had with a fellow human. So I maybe wouldn't go straight in to say that we have to have face to face, and as a somatic coach, you know, that does matter, but I think it's about adapting. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say that it is absolutely important to be yourself. Bella just blew my mind when she spoke and said, you know, never back to normal again. And it's like, yeah, I was like, never back to normal again, because, you know, we have all this technology and everything that we have been complaining about, and now it's sort of saving lives. It is absolutely saving lives. We have safe spaces to talk to people and to talk about our fears. And in the workplace, you have great leaders and people who are talking and taking the time, hopefully. But it is possible for me, from my end, to make a deep connection through technology. So we might as well use that to an advantage, because that will never take place of a hug. But if we have this, then let's use it.
Yeah, I think there's probably a reason why we're all here talking about human workplaces, and I do think, unfortunately, we are a minority. I think we would still build relationships through technology, because I think it's the type of people that we are. We know how to read people, we know kind of what's going on between the lines. But I think until maybe other leaders kind of catch up with the 2020s kind of way of working, the skills that are needed, you know, the compassion, the empathy, the connection, it's not in some people's DNA to reach out to people and just check that they're okay.
Yeah.
For me, it's
Can
a
I give
given.
an example of that? So today, before COVID, I've got 200 people in my team, and I used to meet them every 3 months, and we do, because we've got the university and we've got lots of lovely space. Often, once I was up on a stage that was used for varsity darts whilst talking to my team, which was way more daunting than a normal team meeting. But today I did it on Blackboard, which is our teaching software, and I couldn't see any of them. And I had a technical fail, and I was doing it on my phone in my bedroom with my daughter having her nappy changed behind me. So it was a fairly intense experience. And I was thinking, how can I convey some of the difficult things that I'm going to have to talk about in that conversation with no feedback whatsoever? And the feedback that I was getting wasn't related to what I was trying to say. And I think that's the point, you know, back to the kind of humanness. You've got to dig inside yourself a little bit there. And I think that does play to extroverts. I think that's something, again, which is about inclusivity and how other people cope with those situations. So I was thinking, this is all right. I'm not getting any feedback, but it's going fine. And I was thinking about it with myself. If I was a different type of person, if feedback was more important, or I was less confident in that situation, I think it would be a hell of a lot harder. And that's something I think that the technology will never be able to fix. And there's lots of different personality types, there's lots of different ways that you adjust to using the technology. Some people will, like you say, have really open conversations using this type of technology, and I think in small groups it's much more inclusive. But on a bigger stage where you aren't getting the same kind of, you know, like nice little grins from someone in the corner, and you know, those type of things that make it an experience, I think it can be quite tough. And yeah, so that's what worries me a little bit about some of the opportunities that we've got.
So Vim, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, I was going to say as well, the kind of it is the nuance, it's the fidgeting, it's like you were saying, it's the fidgeting that you don't see, or when you walk into an office and you've had a crap morning and you feel like crying, your manager might pick up on that and take you out for a coffee. That's just not seen anymore, and that's not there online. And for me, if someone messages me to be like, oh, are you okay for a quick call? I instantly think something bad's happened, I've done something wrong. Whereas if someone came up to my desk and were like, oh, do you just want to have a chat? I wouldn't have that anxiety. So I think it does take that learning and different leadership to guide and help support people through online conversations in a way that we've not really had to before.
I think this brings us kind of to the next natural question, and I'd be curious if folks online can maybe throw into chat, you know, their answer to this also. But so what gets in the way of workplaces being human? And maybe let's throw this to Penny to start, and then we'll move on from there.
I would say bureaucracy and outdated structures. So the micromanaging and the structures and the like the desk sitting, like if someone's not sat at their desk in the office for so many hours, they're not doing the work. And I think this time has really thrown that up in the air, because everyone's had to not be at the desk and doing it, and has proven that they can be as productive or sometimes even better. So I do think it's something that I talked about before, with the technology has moved quicker than we've moved our structures in work, and the work culture and the work structures, and this whole like the flexible working thing that people have been battling for more and more recently. I think hopefully this period we'll see a bit of that come into it as well. I think this has cracked it open more than we've had well before. Unprecedented is the word that everyone was saying in the beginning, isn't it? But I think, yeah, just old-fashioned structures, old-fashioned models, old-fashioned leadership styles. Yeah, it's a new day.
So a couple folks in chat, Lucy and Jules, both were talking about things that really have to do with emotions and having difficult conversations, and the increased barrier, I think, as you're saying, that this digital workplace brings to that, right? And as Vim was saying, not being able to stop by somebody's desk. You can go to Anne for this in terms of how we might handle dealing with some of these difficult conversations, given that we've now got greater distance. How can we maybe close that to be able to break through now that we have this digital workplace?
All the things that have come up in the conversation are about this idea of connection, because you're not seeing people, you're not walking past people's desk, you know, you're not standing around having a chat over a cup of coffee or whatever. And one of the things that I find managers and leaders that seem to do this really well, they recognize that checking in is super important. And it's not checking in for task, it's not checking in for, you know, to check up. It's absolutely checking in and doing it regularly enough that it becomes a habit, so that you start to really pick up on the sound of somebody's voice. Because I find some of the feedback I'm getting from the clients that I'm working with is that actually sometimes without Zoom on or Microsoft Teams or whichever your favored platform is, sometimes just voice to voice, you can hear so much in the voice that actually sometimes Zoom can be a distraction, or the visual can be a distraction. And if it's a checking in conversation, it's amazing how intimate it can feel when you're you're scaling out other things. The other thing, obviously, you flagged at the beginning at this mental health advocacy. I'm finding that when people understand more about the continuum of mental health and how we all vary up and down it, and some people are being really triggered at the moment because, you know, their conditions are being triggered. Understanding a bit more about that, so having more knowledge, enables you to be less afraid of asking questions and having those open conversations. You know, it's back to that notion of connecting and listening to connect, rather than listening to judge or, you know, ask your question or whatever.
I think the phone is a good one. I've done that quite a bit. Sometimes the Zoom is too much all the time.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, you can listen much better when you're only listening. I think, yeah, I think that can help, because the thing with Zoom as well, it's quite in your personal space. Like if you don't have a personal office where it's fixed or some part of that, and if you've got a lot going on and it's like someone wants a Zoom call, it's like, well, I might not want someone to see right now. Like I might not want to be like, yeah, okay, boss, yeah, come in. Look, you know, a phone call is much easier, it's more natural, it's, you know, you don't have to have done, you know, it's, and you can just focus on the listening. I think that's a really good one.
I think our boundaries are being, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think why I say that is because I had my assumptions really challenged when I was doing some coach training, and one of the participants had no sight. And what I learned from the exquisite nature of what she picked up was that, yeah, you know what, sometimes we assume things, and actually, yeah, without the sight and listening with both our ears can be absolutely incredible. Sorry, I interrupt you, Samantha.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think our boundaries are being challenged. I think, you know, when else would you go on a call with a customer and say, oh, look around my house, have a look at the bookshelf behind me. It feels like we kind of bring in the work life into our home life, and I think there's a lot of positives come with that. It's more human. Yes, you can maybe hear my dog now and again, and you can hear wife bambling around in the background, but actually there's also a boundary that you want to maintain between the kind of the work and the personal life. And it feels like at the moment there's that kind of question of, are we sleeping at work? Are we working at home? You know, what the kind of boundaries are all kind of blurring into one. And I think for some people, you know, some organisations have said, if you're having a Zoom call, you must have your camera turned on. And I think that is massively unfair, and that's not the human way to do things. There's been a lot of people push back. People that have got kids that have been asked to join calls at 9 a.m. when the kids are still in like giddy mode from waking up. You know, they've not had a chance to grab a shower. They don't want to be going on a Zoom call and turning the camera on. And I think this is what the humanness of the workplace needs to kind of adapt to the real world that we're all in.
Yeah.
We're talking a little bit about boundaries, and I just wanted to talk to Mish for a second about, you know, the work that you're doing with first responders and kind of overcoming just the emotional barriers, the professional, the ego barriers of being willing to open up and be a little bit more human. Maybe you can speak a little bit about just what it takes for those folks to open up. I mean, you can imagine these first responders are folks who generally have to put on, you know, that air of invincibility many times, and for them to open up about some of the stress and trauma that they're suffering is difficult. How is it that you're able to do that with them?
It's been a challenge. I initially just started just to help and feel useful and say, you know, these guys don't have any kind of attention help here. I don't know, in any country, but certainly not in mine. So neither in Guatemala nor in Argentina. So what I have learned from them is that they're taking the courage not only to go there and do their job, but to take the difficult conversations that they were never politically correct enabled to do. You know, so if I have ever seen somebody change their values and their systems and the way we're working, is with these guys, you know, nurses, doctors, firefighters, whomever is in the front end. And they're having those tough conversations at home, where they're having tough conversations with themselves. They're wondering, is this what I really wanted to do with my life? Some of them are reassuring that, but it's the values and having these tough conversations and embracing and having the courage to say enough is enough. Sometimes they will not turn on their cameras, and that's okay. I don't have any rules for coming here. It's a safe space, but mostly they turn them on because they want to be seen, as per their words, not my perception. You know, I want to thank you for allowing me to be seen, are the things that I get. And that's true for I think for some of my clients and people that I work with. Some people want to be seen and they don't care about the boundaries. They need the humanness. In Spanish, the H in human is silent. So my motto is to bring the H back into human and to make it sound like something and to make it alive and to bring back the H in human so it doesn't sound like human. So that's what I'm seeing. It's basically having those tough conversations, and they're so adrenaline based and with so much anxiety that their own psychological safety is at risk. So I'm not qualified to treat them as a psychologist, but I do send them there. It's been very rewarding, but it is I find that this might be true with all of the workers and the leaders themselves dealing with all of this.
Vim, did you want to jump in? I thought I saw you.
Oh, yeah, less about the psychological safety, but more about the video versus phone call. And I think the beauty of going back to phone calls is it means you can get up and walk around. And I think that's one of the things I miss the most about being in an office is the walking meetings and just getting out into the fresh air. And I think the more we're forcing people to sit at a computer and be seen on a video, the less we're encouraging people to get out and get fresh air. And I think that the big opportunity that I've seen missed is a voice call, or even a kind of conference call, but that's just voice only, and you encourage everyone to just go out for a walk at the same time.
I think there's a real worry that we're going to replace office presenteeism with online presenteeism, and that, that's something I can't remember whether I mentioned this in my session, but I really have encouraged my team to minimise the amount of video calls they're on a day because it's exhausting. And I think that even if we extrapolate it out to a kind of post-COVID world and never normal again, we will be working from home more, and I hope to take the benefits from that. But also, it's not about replacing always being at your desk for 8 hours a day with always being online, and that just doesn't feel productive. It doesn't feel human. It doesn't feel like you're actually caring for your staff in any way. But again, there's those inner, well, if I'm not there, what will people think? The things that Vim talked about before. So again, creating that environment where someone senior gives permission and says, no, you don't have to do that. You don't have to turn your camera on. And actually, yeah, one-to-one calls are brilliant. And have you thought about a socially distant meeting in the park? You know, that type of stuff. And one of the things I find is, and again, it's probably due to how I choose to kind of be, is to say I really struggled a couple of weeks ago, and I had a cry in the garden with my friends, and I felt loads better. And then I went for a walk and bringing that honesty about when you've struggled with the new normal or the way that we're going to be for a while, and kind of offering solutions to making that a little better. So I really miss the walking, Vim. We've got such a big campus in Sheffield, and I used to get out and about, and I'm just, you know, it does feel like we're going to be a funny lot after all of this. We'll just be we'll be like kind of mole people coming blinking out into the light.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, it's got to go to choice, and I think obviously for an element we lost our choice. It wasn't an option, but I think now we've got the choice to, yes, we can go for walking meetings. It's not about working in the office or working at home. It's got to be that balance, and it's got to be about the task that you're doing. If I want to work with my team, yeah, I might choose to go and work in an office with them. It might be half of the people in the office, half of them dialing in. It's got to be your personal choice around what you feel like you want to do on that day, because that's when you'll bring your best self. If you're getting told yes, you must come into the office 2 days a week and it must be a Monday and a Friday because I can't bear the thought of you taking an extra long weekend. That's not going back to choice, and that's not trust, and that's not the human bit. What difference does it make if I'm working at 10 o'clock at night compared to 9 till 5? It doesn't, you know, unless you've been working 9 till 10 p.m. and that's different. But I think this is where organisations need to give that kind of a little bit more autonomy, but also individuals to take responsibility for how they work and to really start driving change. We can all sit and talk about it, but we all need to start doing it. And that even
Absolutely.
because I did a 14-hour day yesterday, despite everything that I say. It's because sometimes it just happens.
Well, there's two comments in chat, one from Barry Thompson, the other from Melissa Moorhead, that speak about one of the struggles or one of the things getting in the way is the need to measure output. And, you know, the way that we've done it has been hours in the past, right? Or by widgets if you're in a factory. And many of you have used that term, you know, output, not hours, when we've been talking. I'm wondering how we answer these folks who are seeing that struggle of measurement being one of the drivers of how things go in the workplace. Mish, go for it.
I think I would think that we all need to revisit personally and in the workplace our mission, our vision, and our reason for being, our why, to reevaluate our identity. And yes, of course, I've seen some of the comments, and profit and money always get in the way. But how do we make the money without measuring? And you can't go to a plant and tell the guys not to measure quality, for example, because if we assume that everybody is just doing kind of intellectual work, that's one thing. But if you go to a plant, they still need to make quality. But it's about the quality of their lives also, and how to measure that, and how you measure that, and where you get those meetings, especially if you're working with Lean Six Sigma or something like that. You're still not going to get results, but the way you get to those results, they go through people first. You are the one in charge of making the product, handling the machine. So if we revisit the why and the how, maybe it's not always a Zoom call, but reviewing numbers, it's always going to be there. But from the human side, it's going to mean, okay, how are you feeling about this? Are we getting the numbers? What can I do there before we go to the numbers? Go to, instead of backtracking the numbers, going to leading measures. Well, how are we going to get there? How are we doing to the leading through the results? And that might help a little bit, but it's going to take a team effort, and that is going to take trust.
I think there's an acceptance as well that we can't measure everything. I can think of people in my team that when they're around, I know that the team perform better. They pick everybody up. We have a good laugh. We miss them when they're not there. And it's like, well, actually, how do we measure that humanness that they bring to the team? So I think, yeah, not everything can be measured, but we must get to a point where it's measured on, this is the business aim. Are we meeting our aims? And if we're not, that's when we need to go back to the people and say, we need to meet these aims. In fact, are these aims even realistic? Where we get these aims from is always a good place to kind of get back to as well.
Can I just have a shout out for Kate Rayworth? I don't know if any of you have read Donut Economics. She's currently working with the Dutch government, I think. And she talks about very different measures of success. And I think what's been very interesting is how we've had a bit of a throwback with the climate, with the environment, with the economy, with how people are feeling, with health. There's been so many different things emerging, and she very much speaks to this about, you know, we really are at a time of rethinking and redoing business and living and health. And she talks very eloquently about it. So I think if anyone's really interested in that integrated approach that measures success in different ways, not just about economic metrics, but, you know, about the quality of lives and, you know, the way education is. And she writes about it very eloquently. So I'm just making a shout. I don't make any money by shouting out, but she's a very interesting lady with some very interesting ideas. So for people that are wanting to perhaps think differently, she's a really good person to tune into.
So Bella, you've got the biggest team. How do you measure that your 200 souls that you have in your team are doing the work without them being sat online so you can see they're there?
Well, there are some, I think the first point that I want to make is just reflecting on, there's a certain amount of privilege in white collar work, for want of a kind of easy to reference term. So people that can work remotely for a long period of time. Quite a few of my team are in customer facing roles, and at the moment they're on the phone, but actually when we do have students in, they need to be there to help the students. And so there isn't necessarily the choice in those roles about where and the options and how they can work. So I think reflecting on that's really important, and also not creating an us and them culture as well, which I think is really problematic when you've got a large team, and being really open and saying that the people that do this work are doing the really important work, and we need to be able to strike a balance between what they need to do and what other people need to do. As for kind of productivity, I've been kind of, I've never ever thought that presenteeism, which I think is the easy shorthand for being at your desk all the time, it's always slightly done my head in. And I've worked with quite a few people who are very fixed on that. Well, if they're not there, and it's all trust based. And at the end of the day, there are some easy metrics that I can use for whether my team are delivering what they need to deliver. So it's about, you know, whether the systems are up, whether the customers are happy, whether the calls are being answered, whether we are meeting project timescales, whether we're delivering values are really interesting concepts in IT, and whether the products that we're delivering are valuable and they're going to be used, and that type of stuff. But the thing that I've really kind of emphasized over the last few months, and to be honest before, even though it was harder because the university expected people to be at their desks, is it's not about the time that you're at your desk, it's about what you produce. And some people can really cope with that, and then they think, okay, so what it is that I produce, and then they can think about the value that they deliver. And other people are a bit like, what does that mean? So then you do have to spend a bit of time, like Mish says, kind of actually being able to describe in simple terms what it is that they are delivering, and the kind of value and the output. And that's the core of it, but it's not easy, and I'm nowhere near it, you know. I can say it, but whether the team are actually kind of going, oh yes, let's do that. So I think there's a bit of leading from the front, and then there's also kind of following it up with kind of saying, well, this is what we actually meant, and you are delivering or you're not. Because the other suspicion, the thing that people who are presenteists always come at, which is, if you can't see them, how do you know what they're doing? It is just a fundamental lack of trust. And someone's put that in the chat. If you trust people, they tend to blossom. And there's a tiny percentage of people that take the mickey, a tiny percentage. But when they do, you have to address it, because then that absolutely undermines the trust amongst the rest of the team. Because if they're working hard and then they can see someone's taking the mickey, then that's taking advantage of them. So again, addressing that's really important.
I think we've got in a position where we've been doing things and working in a certain way for that 5% that take the mickey. HR have been there with the policies and the procedures, and it's not for the 95% that go out there and want to achieve their best every day and want to dream of skiving work for a couple of hours. It's not for them, and I think often it's that 5% that are almost ruining it for everybody else. And I think we've got to kind of start managing our teams in a way that the 5% are dealt with in the right way. And actually we give trust until we have a reason not to trust people. I think we're too easily working the wrong way around. People are having to earn it.
But it feels like it just follows on from school.
Yeah. Say more, Penny.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Say more.
Well, that just follows on from school. So it's you've got to be in class, you've got to be there at this time, you've got to sit there and just be good and be quiet, and you get sent to principal's office and then put your hand up to go to the toilet or whatever. And some work structures, not all, but some have that same feeling. I was speaking to someone today, a new client, and she said they'd had someone come in, just totally change the culture. It's like, you only can have half an hour for lunch. You can only be doing this. If anyone wants time off, you've got to get a signature from me. It's like absolute micromanagement nonsense. And if you treat people like that, they're more likely. As soon as someone tells me to behave like that, I'm immediately like, right, I'm off. I'm off for it. Like you get more work out of people the more you trust and the more you give people space. They will always give more than if you try and dictate what people should do. Like, we're all adults, and like Simone says, most people aren't there to take the mick. It's you know, everyone's just trying to do the best they can and fit around things. And you know, it is even that culture all the way back from school, and does even that need changing now? I mean, it's not just work environments, but how much this has been a change for kids, you know, and that and their experience now, how does that influence as they grow older? And we don't have a finishing point yet, you know, like, so I think it's it's a big one all round.
I was saying a similar thing to Amanda yesterday, weren't I? And saying that, you know, the naughty kid in class is always the one that gets shouted at because they must sit there and sit still and put the hand up, and we kind of trying to control people all the time. And I think even down to the whole, don't run, you'll fall over and hurt yourselves, and then guess what? Rope and not being able to run quick enough or fast enough or far enough because we're just told not to do these things all the time. I think,
and some people just aren't meant to sit and stay still and be in those places. I wasn't, and so you get wronged for it. And it's not, you know, I probably do more learning since I've left school because I can do it at my own pace, like you know, but that structure of school and being told what to do just absolutely didn't work for me. So it doesn't work in an office. It's not going to work in an office environment either. And it's almost been a little bit, there's one way. So it'd be really interesting to see, like Vim talks about with the inclusion as well, and that choice of, and what Simone's saying about, it's like almost, you know, making systems to fit the naughty 5% or whatever, rather than looking at all the different options that there might be able to be to help everybody.
and I think embracing the 5% as well.
Yeah.
I think, you know, that.
There's another point about this that I've found. So my kids are 2 and 7, so lockdown's been interesting for me, mainly because my partner who's had bobbed behind me before, we have to tag team because he's a lecturer, so sometimes he's teaching and someone's got to be with the kids all the time. And one of the things that I found really hard was, how am I going to do my work in this limited time? And is it that I'm going to work till midnight every night? And I couldn't, because it wasn't helping anyone and I wasn't being at my best. So the productivity question is and Amanda gave me a pasting for this, which I think was really useful, which is, what are you best doing? Where, and again, it's back to that value question. So where can you offer the most value with the limited time that you have, and don't send yourself kind of to the point of illness or anxiety or all of those things that I was at risk of. And I think that's really interesting for everyone more broadly, which is 37 hours a week, 38 hours a week. It's probably come from some kind of system that was probably a lesson of empire. I think schools are based on the East India Company and churning out accountants. So I think, you know, the models of empire that we've got. Why is a working week the working week that it is? What can you actually feasibly do within the productive time that you've got? And again, back to trusting people to actually say, this is the important thing that I've got to do, and this is the next important thing that I've got to do in order to meet the framework of what it is that's part of my job. And I think we can challenge some of those things, not least because we're about to go into one of the hardest recessions we've ever had. And I think ways of working and value and all of those things are going to be really, really interesting. And why not start to challenge the legacy of empire in the workplace? We might as well.
Can I add in that, and I don't know, Bella, whether you're going to agree with this, but Bella and I both worked at an organisation called Loan Direct, and when we first started there, it was very experimental, and we were encouraged to work flexibly. We could do compressed hours. They were experimenting around delivering on outputs. And then the organisation merged with another, who won't be named, and they brought in all of their rules. And the rules included encouragement by line managers to just monitor, how long do people spend in the toilet? How often do they go? How much, how often are they ill? How many days? Do they come in late? You know, what time do they come in? And we were all knowledge workers where this was all a complete irrelevance. And so as we were sort of getting encouragement to pick up these rules, which I was trying to desperately ignore, but the ones that I couldn't ignore and protect the team from, the more the organization squeezed and what you were allowed to do, the worse behaved people became. And it just became really ridiculous that people who would go the extra mile, work extra hours if it was needed on projects, would suddenly look at you and say, well, are you going to pay me overtime for that? And would become very, very transactional. And I just think that's really fascinating, that squeezing as well and mistrust or protection doesn't bring out the best of us. It brings out our worst behavior. Do you agree, Bella, or is that just my weird team?
No, it was exactly the same. You know, I used to do overnight releases and I would sleep on a couch. I'd slept under my desk. And when they changed that, you know, when the trust went, why should I do that? You know, what? And it was what's really interesting about what you've just said is that going from being trusted to not being trusted is harsher in a lot of respects from going from not being trusted to being trusted, even though you feel, you know, the actual experience of it is more damaging the other way around. But there is still a lot of nerves about trying to figure out what responsibility you need to take in a higher trust environment. I think that's quite interesting because, and what I'm seeing in my team as well, is people are still asking a lot of permission because they're still thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure. But again, that's a thing that will take time for people to kind of build up that trust. But yeah, no, it was an absolute bloody nightmare at that place. And then eventually that place, there were lots of things around that just became the good people left. And that's the ultimate end of that, which is if you want to keep the best people, then you trust them, you give them autonomy, you have honest conversations, and that's something that didn't happen there.
And I know as well from my experience of that place that when things got tough, people ran off. So it wasn't people digging deep and going, we will get the company back on track. People started applying at my place for a job, and because they didn't want to remain there. So I think, you know, it shows you that to get the most out of people, you know, you need to have that relationship where people want to work there, and they will dig deeper if you've got that good relationship. And if it's transactional, they want to know, will you get paid for that extra 10 minutes that I've just did? So it comes round full circle if you treat people right.
I just saw a comment that made me giggle about that it sounds very familiar in Argentina to lose the trust. But I think that as leaders, we all need to redefine what it is to hear the voices that are unheard, the 5% that Simone was talking about, and make sure that everybody, that we're listening, actually listening and changing policies. And this is going to scare a lot of people in HR, but let me tell you, the first contact in companies, anywhere, any kind of company, is the leader. The first contact for HR is the leader. Who do you talk to for vacation, for time off, and who do you ask permission about not to go on the Zoom call? Your boss. You don't call HR for that. So you are the first contact for HR. You're the first person they trust. So that's very important to me to get through, you know, and how that's why I saw a comment also about conflict conversations. You are the first person that they trust, and you're not their dad, not their mom, not their whatever, you're their leader. But people have to inspire you to be the leader. Just with that.
So I think this maybe is getting to the question of, okay, so if you're a leader, if you're looking to move your organization forward, trust is obviously so critical. What are the steps that you need to take to build that trust? And certainly it's not a wave of a wand. It's not something that happens quickly. And I'll throw this out just to the group to see who would like to jump in first. And maybe, you know, Vim can, I haven't heard from Vim here, maybe you can talk about breaking down some of those barriers too. What is it that we need to do to build trust in that organization so that we can elevate the 95% and not fixate on that 5% that's checking out?
Yeah, well, I think it like to echo what everyone said, it's listening to everyone, so including the 5% in that, because it's as important to listen to the voices that are disgruntled as it is the voices that are happy. But I think leaders need to start by opening up their own vulnerability and building honest, transparent relationships with their teams. But for me, it really comes down to the culture that exists in a workplace and how we start reframing culture from what's traditionally been top down to bottom up, and then meeting in the middle. So if this is the culture that we want to sell ourselves on in order to get business or present out into the world, then how does that reflect on the culture that we actually have? And what are the stories that we're telling ourselves versus the reality that's there? But using appropriate tools and techniques to empower individuals to reflect on who they are, but during their work time, not as a kind of bit that you have to do outside of work, during work time, to really think through who they are, what they can do, how they do it, and use that to build the team environment of, well, I know Vim doesn't work very well before she has a cup of tea in the morning, so, or like booking a meeting after 10 o'clock with her, or whatever it might be, so that we then start to understand each other on a much more personal level and building those habits that way.
One of the things that somebody that I work with, she's in retail, so she is managing many people in a large retail organization. And over the past 3 months, it's been really difficult, particularly at the beginning with all the toilet rolls and all the real challenges. And she said one of the best things she did was get everyone together and work on a shared task. And it wasn't a particularly glamorous task. It was actually cleaning, and it was taking everything off the shelves, and she mucked in and everybody mucked in. And what started to happen, there was disgruntled and don't want to do this. And then over time, people, as they were in that process for several hours, started to talk about why were they doing this? This is back a bit to what Mish was saying. You know, what's the point of this? And they started to have sort of crazy songs going on and you know, a bit of messing about. And through some shared activity, they ended up meeting the standards that they needed to, which was a highly disinfected environment that was safe for people in a COVID situation. So there was that shared success, but through doing something together, there was transparency, honesty, all of those things that kind of matter. But it was by doing something together and mucking in, it seemed to really help with what wasn't starting out as a great high trust, we're all in this together. There was nothing like that at all. Very, you know, very interesting. And that's continued. What's really interesting, that from that early, fairly challenging moment in her management career a few months ago, the trust has continued, and it's continued to evolve, which I think is quite interesting.
I'm just going to summarize some of the key things, because we've asked them what we think builds trust. And so for the people who are kind of listening, it would be great if you can add into chat what you think builds trust. And what I've heard sort of Vim talk about is that sort of self-awareness and also awareness of others. So knowing not to book you into a kind of a 7 a.m. meeting, and also to have that awareness to know when you're at your best, when you're not at your best, so you can work together. You, Anne, have talked about finding spaces for shared success, transparency, making sure everyone understands the why of what we're doing, and sort of having that collective working. Does anyone else kind of around the panel have things they want to throw in about what builds trust?
In my experience, building trust is about asking what trust is all about for them. What is it that I need to do to trust you, or what I need you to, for myself to be trusted. It's sort of leading with humility, but with audacity at the same time, having the courage to ask those questions to everybody as a team, either you have 10,000 people or 3 in your team.
I like that point on
listening and hearing somebody.
Penny?
I like the point on vulnerability. So it's a little bit, you know, if you can show that you have trust in them, so you can show a bit more of yourself and be vulnerable that way, so then it can be reciprocated, so it's not just a one-way street. You can't say, oh, share, how are you feeling? But then you be very closed door and live in a very separate office, and it's knock on the door for a meeting. I think you need to be more open and vulnerable in what you do and your work and your experience, and also hold yourself to account. You know, so not, yeah, it's not just so top down.
There's something called attribution error, right? That in essence, and I'll probably butcher this a little bit, is that we ascribe our failings in ourselves to environmental causes and failings in others to character flaws, right? So when someone on the highway cuts you off, they did it on purpose. They did it to ruin your day. They were malicious in their intent rather than they didn't see you.
Yeah.
But when we cut somebody off, it's like, oh my God, they were in my blind spot. I you know, oh my goodness, I never saw them. I'm, you know, terrible. The getting out of that blind spot, right? And there are other heuristics, mental biases, I think, that cause us to see others differently than we see ourselves, and to hold ourselves maybe to some of the same standards, or to allow grace to others in the way that we extend it to ourselves is necessary for that. And certainly a lot of flexibility, like all of you have been talking about, being human at work and that individuality to do things differently. It also is incumbent upon all of us then to adapt to that individuality, right? It's much easier to say, like, there's one mode of being, and all I have to do is just behave in that one way, and everybody's going to have to conform to that one way. There's some ease in that. It's much more complex to have to adapt and know that, okay, I need to get Vim later because she needs to have the tea. Someone else is an early riser. I need to go to them first. I mean, there's a lot of information, but we want that for ourselves, right? We want to have people adapt to our idiosyncrasies, and yet we sometimes aren't willing to adapt to others as much. So being willing to adapt to others might in some way then start to rebound to ourselves and allow for some of our own needs to be met.
I think I'm just looking at the time. It'd be great to hear from Bella about what her view is on building trust, and also Simone, I'm with you that I think listening is really fundamental as a part of that building of trust. Bella, do you want to get in a last word?
2 points. The first one about vulnerability. I noticed in myself, so I was doing some reflection, that, you know, on one hand I can talk about feeling vulnerable or a difficult experience I've had, but yesterday I met someone who was technically far more competent than me in a specific area, and I've been analysing that conversation, during which I admitted to not being as technically competent as that person, and it's made me feel anxious all day. And I think it's one of those things where you think, okay, so I'm happy to express something about how I've been feeling, because maybe I'm feeling on the other side of that. But if it's something that I can't necessarily fix instantly, it's definitely kind of preyed on my mind today. And that's a good thing for me to reflect on, actually, because that's how a lot of people must feel in a lot of different situations. And yeah, it was definitely an uncomfortable feeling that I felt today. But the trust thing, I suppose, is being able to say that and kind of feel comfortable to say that, and to kind of think about how I'm going to learn from it. But also the one point about trust, and I think it's coming from working in such a large organisation like a university, where everyone is super clever and wants autonomy and wants to be able to do their own thing and establish trust. And actually, a lot of the time, my role's about working in the grey around those things. So thinking about what Ken was just saying, I would love to be able to adapt to everybody, but in my team, there are 200. In the wider staff, there are 8,000 who all have really interesting ideas about what they want to do. And then when you add the students in, you've got 30-odd thousand. And actually, the truth is that the big part of it is often compromise, but being honest about what the compromise is. And I think that's the point, which is, if you are doing something that you know people won't be happy with, acknowledge it, and then you at least get to maintain the trust, because they know that you're not doing it because you haven't clocked it, but you're doing it because you understand it, but actually the circumstances mean that you cannot do that at present. And that is something that I've learned at my cost, but it is also something, again, when you are dealing with such a large group of people with so many different needs and so many awesome people, compromise is a big part of it. So yeah, that's my final word, if that's all right.
Such a good last word. So Ken, I'm looking to you. Is it time to say goodbye? What do you think?
I hate to do that, but I think it unfortunately is time to do that. So I want to thank all of our guests who've been here through the entire series: Anne Archer, Michelle Echevarría, Evan Roth, Wendy Swire, Bella Abrams, Benny Lee, Simone Fenton Jarvis, Vimla Apadou, and Jules Roberts. You all have been phenomenal. The quality of these conversations has been amazing. Thank you all for joining us today and for this whole series. Thank you to all of our guests really around the world, certainly on both sides of the Atlantic, but I know we've got some viewers from around the world, and this all would not have been the same without all of you and your participation. So thank you so much. We are going to be back, not right away. We're going to be back in the fall. We haven't quite set dates yet, but keep an eye on social media, and we will be back probably around October or so, maybe. We'll see. We're finalizing all that with series 2, season 2, and we'll go from there. So thank you from me. And Amanda, any last words from you?
No, just that it's been wonderful to have these conversations. I think they're much, much needed. And I think Simone and I are hatching a plan to change the world. So we'll be sharing our thoughts as they get a little bit clearer.
Awesome. So thanks again, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you in future episodes of Leaders in Conversation. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all.
Fantastic.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.